Welcome to Meet the Podcasters, the show where I sit down and talk to successful podcast hosts about their craft. My guests today are Malcolm and Serena Louth, hosts of Kitchen Club. On the show, Sarah and Serena bring listeners honest discussions around the kitchen table with leading experts and influencers from the health and wellness space. Each week, their goal is to learn and grow through conversations about different tools, tips, and behaviours we can all adopt to enrich our lives. And in keeping with the name of the show, they also develop a unique home-cooked recipe in every episode using their guests' top 3 favourite ingredients. In addition, ahead of recording each podcast, they also ask each guest to give them their personal healthy habit, basically something the guest uses daily to enhance their physical and mental well-being. They then put that habit to the test in their own lives before feeding back to the guest during the recording about how they found it during the week of practice. Sarah and Serena both come from a background in recipe development and yoga, so Kitchen Club is the perfect place for them to bring together their love of food and wellness in one place. And based on the audience of regular listeners they've managed to build and fans trying out the recipes and submitting photos on social media, they're clearly very good at what they do. Personally, I really enjoyed having the opportunity to talk to them about their podcast in more detail and also about the important intersection between food, health, and overall well-being. In this episode, we discuss how Sarah and Serena met and got started with Kitchen Club, moving from in-person recordings to remote recordings during the pandemic, the most popular recipes they've created on the show so far, creating color-coded documents as a way to prepare for co-hosting interviews, why it's important not to get obsessed over minor details during the editing process, how to respond to pre-interview nerves, the benefits of producing a podcast in seasons, Sarah and Serena's top tips for finding sponsors as a smaller show, advice and resources for visually branding your podcast on social media, and lastly, we briefly discussed the gut-brain connection and the benefits of meditation. As always, you can find links to all the things we mentioned in this episode in the show notes on the Podcast.co website. The link is in the description if you'd like to go there and learn more. But for now, let's get into the conversation. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Malcolm and Serena Louth, hosts of the Kitchen Club podcast. Thank you both for coming in the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. Pleasure to be on.
So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today because I think it's obvious you put a lot of thought, effort and planning into producing a good show. And I think there'll be lots of stuff that listeners can take away from this conversation. But before we get into your podcast, I thought the best place to start would be with your own journeys. So could you kind of each introduce yourselves? Maybe Sarah, if you want to go first, and kind of explain how you met and became friends.
Yeah. Serena and I met, I don't know how many years ago. It was probably about 7, maybe 6, and 5. Serena's giving me the 5. Feels like longer, hun. We both met kind of, I feel, at the start of our journey into where we are today. We both met when we crossed over working at the Deliciously Ella offices. I was leaving as Serena was joining, and I was drawn to Serena because she made incredible recipes.
Nice.
She made me food, and I was invited back to eat her delicious food. So we really our friendship blossomed over our love of food. And I kind of left that path of working for someone, as did Serena later on. But I went into the world, paddled in the world of food styling, recipe development. And it was something that I was really passionate about, having had polycystic ovary syndrome previously, which meant my diet kind of got shaken up a lot, and I was really trying to focus on living my healthiest life and kind of fueling my body as well as I could. So I was dabbling in that and also practicing yoga to help my bod and my mind, and so steered my path then into becoming a yoga teacher, and now have a beautiful mix of both teaching and still getting to do some foodie stuff with Serena on the podcast. So it's a really lovely blend that we've now created this podcast that really encompasses everything that we both love and we both enjoy. I feel like I've stolen all the how we got started there. But yeah, I'll let Serena dive into hers. That was a very brief journey.
No, thanks, Sarah.
No, Sarah's right. We both used to do a lot more foodie stuff. I used to do a lot of cooking on yoga retreats, and I catered parties and hen-dos and things. And originally when I worked for Delicious Yella, I did a lot of recipe development and stuff, which was great fun. It was really, really cool job. But I think the podcast is really nice now because it means that we still do some stuff with food. Whereas, you know, Sarah now does her yoga and I'm now a confidence coach and a hypnotherapist. So I work with women predominantly who are struggling with anxiety and low self-esteem and stress management and things like that. But yeah, it's really nice to kind of have the podcast to tie us back to our foodie roots.
Nice. I like who was the driving force behind the creation of the podcast? Was there one of you more so than the other that was pushing, like, we should do a podcast, this is something that we should start?
It was definitely Serena.
Do you think? I think we had both been thinking about doing one separately, and I knew that I just wouldn't have the motivation and stuff to do it without somebody holding me accountable. And I think things like this, it's more fun to do it with someone. It's like, it's a hell of a lot of work for one person. So splitting it and having a partner in crime makes the whole thing way more enjoyable.
Definitely. I remember Serena did message me though, and she said, I just listened to you on this podcast. I really love your voice. So do you want to do a podcast together?
Yeah, like when, I don't know, if you first get into podcasting, everyone has that thing where you first hear your voice back and you're like, oh God, like, is that what I sound like? But obviously, Serena, you've got a voice for radio and podcasts.
No, I hated it listening the first time, but Sarah has such a calming voice.
I think you do too, Serena. It's a nice blend.
Thanks, babe.
Yeah, it works. So I presume like both of you were quite into podcasting. Were you listening to the same shows and stuff, or were there any podcasts that you kind of drew inspiration from when you were just starting out?
I would say Table Manners was quite a big influence for us, wasn't it, Serena? And the way that food was involved in that element. But I think we both knew that we wanted to create something a little bit different and to kind of invite our listeners to sit with us and enjoy whatever we were cooking, whatever we were making for our guests, and also a nice way to kind of get to know our guests in the way that we do their 3 favorite ingredients, and we create a recipe from that. I think that was, I don't know where that idea came from really, probably Serena and her good ideas, but it was like, that has been such a core to our podcast now that, yeah, I guess it was influenced by Table Manners. I know we both enjoyed that. Serena, can you think of anything that we were like, yeah?
I don't feel like back then I actually listened to that many podcasts, but I think things like the high-low, like I like the vibe of 2 friends chatting. And I think that was something we wanted to do, and we I'm sure we'll get onto this later, but we had these big visions for it being more than a podcast, it literally being a club and there being events and stuff. And COVID kind of sorry, I was about to swear. COVID ruined that for us.
Feel free to swear if you like.
But we kind of had this vision of it being like a real community rather than just something that people listen to once a week.
Yeah, like I do kind of want to, there's a lot that I want to explore in terms of, you do have some quite unique angles with your shows, like you said, Sarah, about the 3 ingredients and kind of getting your guests to supply those. And you have the healthy habits where you get your guests to kind of give you a suggestion for something that they do every day to improve their own well-being. And you kind of test drive that for a week and report back to the listeners and your guests about how you found it. But before we get into all that, just to make it clear up front, we have kind of touched around it already, but if you just want to explain what the Kitchen Club is all about, who you're trying to reach, and what the concept of the show is basically before we talk about the different elements. So Serena, maybe if you just want to.
So I think that our idea was that in our 2 friendship groups, we're kind of the woo-woo ones who like, I'm trying to think of examples now, who like holistic therapies and moon cups and like all these things. A lot of our friends are like, wait, what the fuck is that? That's really weird. And we wanted the podcast to be a cool way to make some of that stuff more mainstream and more digestible and more accessible to people like us who just didn't yet know about it. I think, as Sarah said, she's had her problems with her PCOS, and I've had a lot of mental health problems in the past. And I think that we've both found so much support and nourishment through the holistic world. and we wanted to make some of that a bit more mainstream and a bit more talked about. Is that, Sarah, do you have anything to add to that?
You literally took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say that exact same thing. So yeah, exactly what Serena said. Just sharing all the stuff that people find a little bit taboo to speak about, and letting it be accessible, and
just breaking down some of those barriers and giving people information that you've come across and that you feel is worth sharing with other people. One of the questions that I had is, obviously you started the podcast before lockdowns and everything happened, and you've been producing it for a while, and then the lockdowns hit. So some of the previous guests that we've spoken to in this show have said that they noticed when lockdown hit, they had like a lot more time to invest in their podcast, and they also noticed that their plays and downloads were increasing. So in terms of how you responded to the lockdown, did it allow you to focus on the podcast? Did you notice any difference in the traction that you were getting online?
I would say it definitely it made our time management much easier, because previously, pre-lockdown, we would travel to one another's houses, and we live literally the furthest away from one another in London as you can, and then we'd cook for our guest who was then coming over and sitting down with us, and we'd all eat together. So it was quite a lengthy process just getting to the recording. And Serena and I do have, we've got a lot going on individually, so scheduling in a couple of months, every week to set aside that time did become quite challenging. And I actually think that lockdown pushed us into this world of like, we must be really efficient with this, and actually change the podcast slightly, because now we don't meet with the guests face to face. So it meant that we could cook the recipes in advance, eat them for dinner ourselves, and then speak to our guest about that recipe, and then they will go and cook it. So it became kind of easier, I'd say. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Serena.
Yeah, I definitely think that the efficiency of it took away a lot of the stress. And obviously without the stress, it becomes more fun. But then on the flip side, it's been really sad not to meet our guests. The whole reason that we incorporated food in the podcast is because we think that food is an incredible way of bringing people together and sharing experiences. And so to not have that physically, to not have that connection and that breaking of the bread with our guests was a real shame.
I was just going to say, in terms of listenership, I think it's quite hard to answer that, because I don't know if organically the listens would have gone up anyway, because we were getting more confident with it, people were knowing about the podcast a little more. So I don't know if that was a direct relationship between lockdown and people wanting to go out on their daily walks and listen to a podcast, because I know Serena and I were both really worried that we thought, is there any point in us doing another season now, because no one's commuting, so is anyone going to even listen to podcasts? Little did we know that they become like people's saving grace, and this time out from all of the chaos that was going on, that people would take us on their daily walks and be so appreciative. So little did we know that was gonna really hit off. So I think it's quite hard to quantify that, and although it's lovely to see your listenership going up and it's something we're really proud of, that's never been the reason that we're doing this. That's never been our drive. So yeah, I think it's quite a hard question to answer.
No, I think you're exactly right. If you get into podcasting thinking like, I just want to chase download numbers and that's all I care about, like realistically you're not going to last. Like if you're not doing it because you're passionate about it, and you would have these conversations regardless, you want to speak to these people because you're interested to learn from them and hear what they have to say, and then if you build an audience, that's a nice byproduct, rather than, it's very easy to fall into the trap of obsessing over the wrong metrics. But it seems that you've got that figured out. I do want to touch on that a bit later, because I know both of you are conscious with the way that you use social media. And I think your Instagram page for the podcast, me and our producer Ben here both thought like this is really well branded, really well designed. Like there's obviously intention and thought that's gone into curating this. So I do want to talk about that. But first, we mentioned before, you do have these aspects which make your podcast unique and which do make it a bit different from other podcasts that are out there, like with the ingredients, the 3 ingredients that you do with your guests and the homework that you do. So I was just wondering, was that something that you like consciously sat down and you were trying to come up with a hook or a unique angle that you could use and implement in your show to separate it, or was it just an organic thing that arose? Serena, it sounded like this was something that you were kind of instrumental in adding into the podcast.
To be honest, I actually can't remember. It definitely wasn't that we sat down and tried to think of an alternative angle. I think that in the beginning it was going to be way more simple. We were like, we're going to sit and talk to people and that's nice. And as the idea developed, I think we were just like, hey, this is a cool idea. This is something we should try. This is a nice way of incorporating food. And I think especially the healthy habits thing, because we were talking to people who interested us and we were trying to give really tangible resources and knowledge to the people listening, that became a really nice thing to support them and to help them and for them to try out, so that it wasn't just like, oh, we're talking to this expert who's really good on nutrition or meditation, or just listen. It gave people something to go away and try and to see for themselves if that was something that interested them.
So like of all the different recipes that you've created so far across the 4 seasons, are there any that kind of jump out to you as being some of the most popular among your fans, or stuff that really kind of took off?
My favourite, and I do think that it might be a firm favourite within the listeners, is our roasted cauliflower. What did we call that recipe? Roasted cauliflower tacos. Do you remember with the chimichurri?
Yeah, that was good for Jordan.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it was called.
Now I can't remember anything else that was in it.
It was like pickled red cabbage and baked chickpeas and roasted cauliflower. That was great. And then we made our own tacos, which was super, super simple. And I mean, that has stuck with me as like one of my favourite recipes. And I do think it's quite a firm favourite. Another one that a lot of people like to make is the baked, again, forgot the name of the recipe. Serena, remind me what it is. The baked balls. Oh, for Rhiannon.
Yeah.
They were like aubergine, truffle and mushroom balls baked in a tomato sauce with mozzarella.
Ooh.
The one I remember everyone going wild for, which I thought was really random, was they were carrot and chickpea fritters with a roasted courgette and tahini dip. And I remember people loving that. And I thought that was kind of niche, but people seem to enjoy that one.
Yeah, I've heard you say that like when listeners and stuff, they'll try out your recipes and they'll post pictures of the recipes that you created and tag you. That must be a nice feeling to see that people are actually engaged and actually trying out these recipes.
Yeah, completely.
It definitely is. And that's what it's all about, that's why we wanted to share it. And that's when it does kind of turn into this club, like, oh, we're all making this lovely recipe together, and it's based on our guests' 3 favorite ingredients, so it's like a piece of them, but we've made it into something that we'll all enjoy. I think that's what's really special about it. And
no, I was just going to say, it's nice proof that people are actually listening. When you're putting so much work into something, it's really nice to get some feedback.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to say, like, the other thing about the 3 ingredients that works really well in podcast format is that the 3 ingredients that your guests choose, there will normally be a reason why they've chosen these specific foods, and there will be often some quite funny backstories that will come out as to why they've chosen these 3. And I never would have thought of that, but yeah, like good content for the podcast as well.
Exactly. And food is so what's the right word for this? Like, it provokes such a memory within you, doesn't it? So when you do get people who really say, oh, this is why it's my favorite ingredient, it's quite wonderful to kind of see that backstory. But I do think one of our one of my favorite moments was one of our guests from the last season, Michael James Wong, and we said, why do you love those 3 favorite ingredients? And he said, because if you put them all together in your mouth, it tastes good.
Straightforward, no nonsense.
Straightforward, spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. We kind of touched on it. So obviously when you first started the podcast, you were sitting down with people in person, as you said, Serena, breaking bread. And this was just a topic that I wanted to touch on, like something that I've noticed, like traditionally, and I think like for all of our evolutionary past, like sitting down, eating together was always a social thing, like bringing people together, building bonds. But I think like in modern society, you know, oftentimes eating can become this kind of solitary, utilitarian thing where it's like, I just got to sit down, get this food quickly, and then kind of move on to the next thing on my to-do list. So I just wondered if you could share your thoughts, either of you, Sarah or Serena, on, you know, the potential negative consequences of doing that, and maybe some advice for people if they do kind of want to enrich their connection to food and how they enjoy it and use it to bring others together and form social connections.
I think this is for Sarah, because Sarah loves like food gratitude and thinking about where it all came from. I will just say my worst kind of people are those people who say like, if I could have all my daily meals in a pill or a shake, I would do it. I don't understand those people. I'm far too greedy and I love cooking too much. But no, I'll let Sarah answer this one.
Well, I thought you were going to say that, Serena, actually. I thought you were going to push me to answer this. But before, I'm going to share something, James, if you don't mind, on like food gratitude. But before I do think that moment that we do sit down to eat, you're so right, it has become so rushed, and sometimes we're still working at our laptops and just kind of shoving food in our faces. And when we eat in a relaxed way, we can digest our food better. Like that is how our body works. If we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, our state of rest and digest, we will digest our food and it will sit more comfortably within us. You know, everything will work properly. If we're in that state of, if we're in our sympathetic nervous system, so our fight or flight phase stage, then our food won't digest because our body is overworking on all the other things. It's, you know, our brain's still stirring, it's getting ready to fight things off. So when we can take a moment to sit down and enjoy our food, even if that's, you know, by yourself, and that's probably been a big experience for people over the last year and a half, is eating by themselves if you live alone. But even, to sit down and really appreciate your food. I have mentioned this on the podcast before. I came up with this food gratitude thing, and I probably didn't come up with it, I probably borrowed it from someone. But if you sit down with your meal and you look at everything that's on your plate, and it could be, I don't know, chickpeas or sweet potato or whatever veg you've got, and you might also have cooked with some spices, cooked with salt, cooked with oil, to see everything on your plate, every ingredient that's gone into your meal, and think, wow, just how much work has everything been through to get here, to get in front of me. And it's a really nice practice of gratitude and food appreciation, rooting us back into the earth and reconnecting us with our food, because it is like, it's all part of the world. We're all together, we're all doing the same thing, we're all growing, and you know, so to have that appreciation is a really lovely thing. And it could even be shared at a dinner table when you do come together with a family or friends and you catch up. Even, I guess it's a bit like saying grace. I'm not religious, but that's like a beautiful moment to do that, you know, to come together and feel that gratitude for everything you've got.
Yeah, I think
quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and also just the research on gratitude is like, that's mounting, like it's increasingly coming out that people who do have some kind of intentional, you know, gratitude practice, whether that's they write down 3 things that they're grateful for in the morning or in the evening, or like you said, pausing before you have a meal and thinking about all the different people that have kind of made it possible. You know, it might sound a bit like, a few years ago, if you had told me this, I was the kind of person who would have immediately like rejected it and be like, nah, never, like this doesn't work. But then you kind of, you know, look at serious scientists are looking into this stuff, and it really does have a powerful effect on your state of mind and how you kind of interact with others. So I think that's a really nice practice that people can take away and try out. One of the things, obviously, your show is co-hosted. You wanted to co-host the show because it would be more fun and kind of engaging to do it that way. Also, as you mentioned, it does make scheduling a bit more tricky and stuff like that. Also, just ironing out, the dynamics behind the microphones. Obviously you're close friends, so there will be just natural chemistry there anyway. But did you have to kind of go through a learning curve with getting comfortable with the process of how you're going to go and approach these interviews, the two of you together?
I think we've actually been pretty lucky. We have spoken to other people who do podcasts with two hosts, and they've said that they've had disagreements and kind of not been really clear on how things are going to run. I think we've always been super compatible with it, and I think we compromise a bit like a married couple. If one of us feels very strongly about one thing, then we'll let them have it, but then they give on something else. I think the only thing, when we first started out, and especially actually when we transitioned to working on Zoom, we had to be very careful not to speak over each other. And so we have like a special color-coded question document, because otherwise we're both big talkers. And if one of us gets going, that's it. So no, that was our only thing. And that definitely, it's far easier in person, isn't it? To kind of read the room, sense when someone's about to finish saying something and then get ready to jump in. But over Zoom with three people in a conversation, it can be everyone's like chomping at the bit to say their piece. So no, that's the only thing that we've really had to learn along the way.
Could you tell me a bit more about this color coded document, because like the technical side of it and how it works, like these are the things that might be valuable for other people listening, like if they're thinking about how they can implement that themselves. So what does that look like?
It's not very interesting at all. It's very basic. I'm not joking when we say like everything we do with our podcast is extremely basic. We are not we're not very good at this. We're not very good at this kind of thing. So to make our lives easier, we have a Google Docs that we share between one another, and the process works that usually Serena will write the questions for our guest on this document, and we also have our show notes on that doc, so we have a doc per guest. We write our script on there for our intro and our outro, and Serena will write all the questions for the guest. I'll then go look at it, check it. No, I'm just joking. I'll add anything else that I would like to talk about, and if I'm like, I really want to ask this question, and then we color code it based on who wants to say what. So I feel like Serena and I both know, I will know the questions that Serena will want to ask, because she might geek out in something that I don't, and then I usually say the awkward things, so I like the silly things. So that's our document, and every time we record, we are both looking at that, looking at our guest, looking back at the document, as I'm sure many people do with their questions. But it's funny, when we first started, our first guest who came on, we didn't have any questions prepared, and I remember her saying, and she's a podcaster herself, I remember her saying like, what? Why have you guys not prepped any questions? We were like, don't know, like we just know what we want to say, so it's going to be really easy. I mean, it was lovely. But yeah, since moving it to Zoom, we definitely had to recognize that like we needed to know who was saying what, otherwise it would just be a big jumble.
That might seem like you said boring, but this is like exactly the kind of things that we're looking for in this show, like the technical how-to dynamics.
I would also say that, just adding on to what Serena said earlier about how it has been quite easy for both of us, I think very early on we both recognize each other's strengths in how we can like use them in the creation of the podcast. I'm not a techie person, but I love to learn that kind of thing, and Serena is like, no thank you to that. So she was very very happy for me to take the lead in all the tech stuff, in, you know, how to record, how to upload, who to host with. And the same with our Instagram page. I really love making all the bits and bobs that you see that go on that page, all of our branding. I get really excited by that. So Serena puts that trust in me, and then I fully trust that she's going to create the most amazing recipes. So yeah, we kind of blend our talents quite well in that way. She does kind of the get ready for the guests, and I do the post. So it's
Nice.
it's quite a nice way to do it.
Yeah, just on that quickly, Sarah. So when you're doing the kind of post-production and editing, is there a lot of editing that goes on, or do you try and, you know, be as focused as you can during the recording, so that kind of minimizes your time on the back end then?
Yeah, definitely try to stay with it. Obviously, we'll have moments where things happen, a doorbell rings and we pause recording, or, you know, we completely say the wrong thing or lose our train of thought. It's funny because at the start, when we first started our podcast, I was quite anal was the only word that came to mind here. I was quite anal about editing out anything that annoyed me when I listened back. And I was very quick to pick up on what people say and how people speak. And I thought, well, if it's kind of grating on me, then it's probably going to grate on our listeners. Just simple things like saying like, or you know, those little habits. Yeah, you know, yeah. Which we all do. And I would heavily try to edit them out the first season. And then I thought, oh my gosh, this is taking too much time, and actually no one cares. This is how this person speaks, and that's wonderful. You know, we're just humans having conversation. We're not TV presenters, or, you know, we're not proper broadcasters. We're just humans. Yeah. So yeah, I learned to stop trying to have control over everything and just let it happen, and then minimize my editing time. Yeah,
you can really go down a rabbit hole but it's like once you tune into the ums and ahs, like you said, or if you notice someone has a particular vocal tick, then you realize like, oh my god, this is going to be like a big operation. And then one of the other things is like, if you're really meticulous and you go through and take out every single one of those, it does feel a bit unnatural, and, you know, you might clip something in the wrong way, and listeners might not know that that's what's happened, but it does kind of subtract something, I think, from the conversation if you go overboard with the editing. Definitely. In that way. Yeah,
I actually quite like the doorbell ringing and the sound of someone pouring themselves some water. I quite like that background noise. I think that sounds quite it makes it all a bit more realistic. The one thing we were both in agreement about from the beginning was that there could be no eating on the podcast. Whilst we wanted to cook for people, the thought of like microphones picking up people chewing, turns my stomach.
Good call. Yeah, right decision.
Yeah. It's my worst.
Yeah.
Meet the Podcasters is brought to you by Matchmaker.fm, the largest online platform connecting podcasters with great guests. Whether you're looking for a qualified expert to feature in your next episode, or you'd like to get booked as a guest yourself, you can sign up today for free. Simply create your profile and get instant access to a growing database of more than 40,000 hosts, producers, and subject matter experts from around the world. You can filter profiles by category, location, and language spoken to quickly pinpoint the right guests and shows. And if you need help promoting your own episodes, you can find lists of other podcasters open to ad swaps and cross promotions. Join the community, record better content, and reach a wider audience. Try it out today by heading to matchmaker.fm or clicking the link in the description. And now, let's get back to the episode.
So when I'd listened to a conversation that you had with the guys that run the Creative Rebels podcast, and I think you said that you were quite anxious before the first interviews. I know when I'm recording this show, if I'm speaking to someone, you know, like even before we got on this call, there's always a bit of anxiety before you hit record on the interview. So do you have any advice on dealing with pre-interview nerves? Maybe Serena, because this is like something that you actively coach people in, or I think it's something that a lot of podcasters do experience when they're doing it for the first time. Like, how can I build my confidence in doing this and not feel overwhelmed when I get on a call and start recording?
Can I just say, it's so nice talking to you when you know so much about our podcast. So thank you. We've had so many people come on who know nothing about our podcast, and they don't know about the ingredients, and they don't know about the healthy habit. And it's really, really lovely that you actually know and you're asking us. And so thank you. Anyway, back to your question. Anxiety. So in the beginning, I was really, really nervous. And actually, the more that we do it, it doesn't bother me anymore. And I think that that's quite an important point when overcoming anxiety and overcoming nerves, is that the more you do something, the more you face your fears, the more you desensitize yourself to that anxiety. And I think with anxiety, there's a tendency to fight it, to resist it, to push it away. And all of that kind of makes the anxiety linger. It gives it an opportunity to get its claws in, and it basically gives the anxiety more airtime than it deserves. Whereas if you can accept, I'm a bit nervous, that's normal, I'm talking to someone who I admire, then that's fine. And another thing actually that's nice is anxiety and excitement have incredibly similar effects physiologically. Like in the body, if you monitored heart rate, sweaty palms and things, you wouldn't really know whether someone was excited or anxious. And so I think that we, for ourselves, can rebrand and remarket our anxiety as excitement in many circumstances. Sure, if you're doing something really scary, like, you know, a job interview, yeah, that is anxiety inducing, but talking to someone on a podcast doesn't need to be scary. And if you can just switch your mindset and tell yourself that you're excited about it, it makes sense of your beating heart and your sweaty palms, and it makes it acceptable, and it makes it far more appealing and manageable than telling yourself you're shit scared.
Yeah, or just like allowing yourself to allowing the anxiety to be there, like you said, that, you know, it is a natural response, and there are certain situations where it is only natural that you'll have some kind of anxiety around it. I like what you said though about excitement, because it is really the mental spin that we put on these physiological sensations that can kind of dictate how we feel about certain situations.
You know, it's so normal to feel that way. Even I'm pretty sure even seasoned pros will still get those emotions and still feel those emotions. I get like that a lot pre speaking to our guests. Serena is much more level-headed, so I just kind of stare at her and she's so calm and collected. But I think it's just really useful to know for everyone listening that everyone gets like that. It's a human reaction, human emotion, and yeah, rather than beating ourselves up about it, as Serena said, just kind of ride it and feel it and own it.
Yeah.
Everybody's winging it. I read a really good analogy actually the other day about anxiety, that think if you're in like treacherous water and you can't swim, if you flail around, you create more problems for yourself, whereas actually if you lie back and float, you float. And I think it's quite cool to see anxiety like that. If you fight it, the more you kind of resist and panic, the worse it gets. And actually, as Sarah said, if you just flow with it, it will burn out. It will run its course, and then you won't feel it anymore. Yeah,
it's funny. Like, it's the mind, and it all works in very paradoxical ways. And yeah, resisting and saying no to experiences will make them persist. But it's that's how it works. Would you say that as it's gone on, it's become easier to produce the podcast? Or basically, have there been any times where it's felt overwhelming? Obviously, you're doing lots of other things on top of your podcast. You've got other responsibilities to take care of. Have there been times where you thought, you know, should we keep going? Or are you fully committed to kind of continuing on with what you started?
Serena, do you want to answer this?
I think there has been for me one moment where I was like, what are we doing? This is too much work. And I think that was purely down to timing. I felt very much like we had scheduled a season. I can't actually remember which season it was, but we had scheduled a season at a time when I had a hell of a lot going on in my life. And I was just like, this is not fun. Why are we doing this? And then the minute you start getting like you put an episode out and you get all these messages saying, oh my God, this means so much to me. You've provided me with the knowledge I was looking for. Your podcast has, we have some incredible messages saying like, listening to your podcast every week has provided me with support and light while I was going through a really dark time in my life. And the minute you get messages like that, you're like, okay, no, great, I'll do it forever. I love it. It's perfect.
As well, when we do notice, I feel like we're quite good at noticing resistance in one another. And it's kind of like being married. I'm not married yet, Serena is. But I feel like it's kind of like a marriage, you really have to let it be an even weighing scales with one another. And if the other person, because you both do want to do it, so if the other person is kind of struggling a little bit, how can you support it best you can, and then the scales reweigh. And I think the start of just before our last season, we both said like, how can we make this easier? How can we still focus on all the other stuff in our lives? Serena's got all of her coaching and I've got my members platform, so how can we not make this feel like a chore? And we decided to make the season smaller. And wow, was that such a great decision. We were like, we don't need to be doing really lengthy seasons. Let's make it shorter. Let's plan all of the recipes in advance. So let's get out all of our guests three favorite ingredients in advance, have a big day where we cook everything. So we're ready to go. We're present for those guests, and we're not thinking week after week, oh gosh, we've got all this stuff to do. Just a bit of pre-planning in advance can really take the weight off and keep it feeling fun and not like too much.
I think even just the fact that producing a podcast in seasons, first of all, just does make life a bit easier. Like some people don't even think about that, because they'll listen to podcasts and their favorite podcasters will put out maybe 1, 2, even 3 episodes a week, and that's what they're used to, and they'll kind of set that bar for themselves. But if you're not doing it full time and you've got other responsibilities and you need to churn out an episode every single week, like chances are something's going to slip. Like I think this is why a lot of people struggle with consistency. But like you said, Sarah, if you've got a season coming up and you can do the proper preparation and groundwork to kind of put you in good stead to kind of work on it intensely for a period of time and get out the other side of it and have episodes that you're proud of and you feel like, we did the best job that we could with those episodes. I think that's something that is people are worth paying attention to. You've noticed, or have you noticed, people don't have it. Like I think what I'm trying to say, some people are afraid to do seasonal podcasts because they think if we stop, then all the listeners that we built up from one season potentially might just go away and forget about us by the time that the second season comes out. But I presume that hasn't been the case for yourselves, and you're getting people returning and they're maybe recommending friends in future.
Yeah, I think it creates, I don't know, for us, I think it creates a bit more buzz in the way that, we have the gearing up for the next season and we create a countdown, and it's like your favorite show on TV, when you see it's coming back, you're like, yes, can't wait to tune back in. And definitely for us, it makes it so much easier that we can actually plan it properly and think, all right, where do we want this season to go? Like, who do we want on? Who are our ideal guests? And really plan it. I personally don't think that I don't think that we'd have still been going 2 years later if we were doing it episodically and just week after week. I just don't think that would be sustainable. No.
I think having a break between seasons means that when we come to a season, we're excited and we have energy and we're super enthusiastic. I think to do it week after week, we would just be exhausted and then we wouldn't give it our all, and then it wouldn't be as special. But because we store it up and we, as you say, build up the list of guests we want to talk to, we get excited about it, which helps everyone else to get excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, hats off to the podcasters that do it every week, because that is amazing. And all the big podcasters kind of do it that way. Adam Buxton, such a big production behind it in terms of what he creates. But I think for podcasters like ourselves that do so many other things, it is seems like the only way to do it, really.
Yeah, I
and
think
the big ones don't do it all themselves.
that's what I was about to say.
Like at the stage where, you know, if we had a producer and someone who did all the editing and someone who did everything, sure, we could do way more episodes. But when we're doing it all ourselves, it's just too time consuming.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, and yeah, like if that was your sole focus in life and you could put all your time and attention into it, then it would be a completely different story. But yeah, don't get fooled by the big, it's not a solo operation for the majority of those people. One of the things that I noticed about your show, and I think it's something that you consciously put a lot of effort into, is you make your ad reads as engaging as they can be. It seems like there is quite a bit of planning that goes on. They do feel genuine, and that you're obviously quite selective about the products that you choose to partner with. So would you have, I don't know, Sarah or Serena, you know, which of you would like to take this question, but if you have any tips for other podcasters about how they can, you know, create better ad reads or find the right sponsors to partner with.
I just think it's funny that you say they sound really genuine, because I always have my friends laughing at me being like, oh, my leggings, blah, 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 blah. But I think the secret probably to making them as genuine as possible is that we really do only recommend brands that we like and that we use. And so when we talk about it, it sounds scripted, because it is scripted, because we have certain points that we need to cover and things we need to say, but the content is real. What we're saying is real. Like, you know, for example, Simprove, the probiotics did sponsored an episode in the last season, and Sarah and I both take Simprove every day. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about it, it is 100% genuine. We both think it's a brilliant product. And I think that's probably really important to us, that we would only work with brands who we really do use and like. Do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I would say for anyone who is trying to get sponsors, it is quite a hard task. I think, you know, you do get a lot of rejection emails, and that's part of it. We email a lot of brands, but I'm pretty sure that this is the case. We only will email brands that we either love and or have worked with previously and have like a lovely long running relationship with them. We did also make a big shift in the last season, because we thought, you know, because sometimes podcasts don't make a lot of money, and that's just the game of it, you know, and we thought, how can we actually make this a bit more sustainable for us? You know, we're putting a lot of time into this. How can we get sponsors on board? Because for some brands who don't have a lot of money, it's quite a big ask if you're asking for them to sponsor an entire season. It's you know, they're like, no way, or we're not gonna, how do we trust that it's gonna help us? So in our last season, we shifted into sponsors episodically, and we said, you know, would you like to sponsor 1 episode or 2 episodes? And that made it a lot more accessible for brands and for people that we genuinely wanted to share their product, but they didn't have much money to put that into advertising. They didn't have a big advertising budget. So I think that's quite a good tip for anyone that is kind of searching for a sponsor, because yes, lots of big brands have money, but probably the brands that you actually want probably don't, because they're startups or, you know, doing their thing.
Yeah, no, I
and
really
that plays back into the idea of Kitchen Club as a community, because we're sharing guests with our listeners who we think they will help them and educate them. And in the same way, we want to share brands with them that we think they'll love. We don't want to work with some huge brand just because they're willing to pay us. We want to share really great products that we use and we love and that we think will benefit the people who bother to listen to our podcast.
Yeah. And obviously, like because again, it's a solo operation and you're managing this all yourself, there is a lot of work that goes into doing all the outreach and connecting with the sponsors and, you know, working out an agreement. But that episodic sponsorship thing is a great tip that I think, you know, people should definitely consider if they are thinking of if they are in a position to get their podcast sponsored. Just kind of before we move on to a few of the last topics, I just wanted to touch on some of we have spoken about your Instagram page already, Sarah. It sounds like you're the kind of creative mind behind managing the Instagram account. So similar to the question about sponsorship, like what kind of advice would you give to people if they're trying to grow a social media following associated with their podcast, like the basic do's and don'ts and things that you found that have worked for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to just add that Serena actually does manage the Instagram account, but I create.
Okay, sorry, apologies, Serena.
Bits and bobs. Yeah, just
Thanks,
giving her
babe.
credit. I would say it's nice to have a mix of things on there, and for us, we have a system of posting where we'll post the recipe that we've created. We'll post a video snippet. Sorry, butterfly was just coming right into the window there. We'll post a snippet of the episode, and then wait, what's our other thing, Serena?
A picture of our guest.
Yeah, so we have a system, so we know that every time there's an episode out, that's what we're posting. We'll post Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe some stories in between, but that just creates for us a strategy to our posting, and we don't get to the week and think, oh my gosh, we've just got this episode released, like what should we put out? When I edit the episode, I then create all the bits for it, so it's all kind of one big bundle, and I'll create the graphic, I'll piece together a snippet of the episode with the guest photo, and I think it's quite nice to share on Instagram, and this goes for kind of any Instagram, something free, and then like something to take people away from Instagram as well. So for our case, it's the free recipe, and for a season actually we moved our recipes onto Patreon, and because we thought, let's try and make a little bit of money from this, and let's turn this into like more of a membership club kind of vibe, but actually it didn't really work for us. We found that the recipes became unshareable because people weren't sharing them with other people and saying, oh, we should make this. So that's the kind of, obviously our podcast is also free, so that's a big thing. But having that shareable thing on Instagram, and it might be a quote, it might be a picture of something, something that people can really see and go, oh, I want to share that with someone else, like they need to know about this, or they need to make this. I think that's a really nice thing about our Instagram, is people can come there, and even I go on there to look through our recipes and go, oh, what do I want to make? It's kind of like its own recipe book, So I think that's quite a nice way to do it, and to just make sure that whatever you're putting out, you're kind of proud of, and that I think to get your own style going with something, ours has shifted a lot, but I think anything we post, you kind of know that it's Kitchen Club, whether it's branded or not. I think it's quite nice for just everything to be really coherent, and like your branding. I think that's quite key.
Yeah. So it's like important to nail that down at the beginning stage, and it might change and modify over time, but at least having some kind of idea of this is kind of what our brand looks like, and this is what we're going for. Because you do occasionally see feeds where it's like, this post looks like this, and then next to it is something like looks completely unrelated, but it's part of the same podcast or whatever. Not everyone's a graphic designer. I'd just be interested, are you creating these images and audiograms and stuff like that? Are you creating them on Photoshop, or?
I'm not techie enough for that, James. I create them on Canva.
Canva, yes. I was hoping you'd say Canva, because I was going to recommend.
Yeah.
If people are trying to brand their podcast simply, then that is a great place to go.
It really is. Yeah.
They've got a lot of good templates and stuff, and you don't need to. Photoshop is quite intense if you don't know what you're doing. There's a lot of buttons and a lot of stuff that could potentially go wrong. So if you're not a graphic designer and you want to create a coherent brand for your podcast social feed, Canva's a really good place to go.
It's like graphic design for dummies, isn't it?
That's why I love it. Yeah, simple, can't go wrong.
And then I also make the videos. We kind of stopped doing them a little bit because they took a bit longer, but I make those videos with the text on a website called Headliner.
Oh yes.
So that's quite a good one to use, and there's probably loads more actually, but Headliner's quite strong, I think.
Yeah, just a quick plug for Podcast.co. We're actually integrated with Headliner as is, so anyone that hosts with us can create those nice audiograms on Headliner.
Great.
One of the other things, I don't know if this is something that you've done, I couldn't see, but it potentially might be an avenue of marketing that you might have tried. So have you ever done any collaborations or partnerships with other content creators or other podcasters in terms of cross promotion, or is that something that you've not kind of explored?
It's something that we get asked about quite a lot, don't we, Serena, in emails by PR companies who probably look after the other podcasters. But I think we're almost quite strict on who we have on. Because if we genuinely don't want to, it sounds quite mean actually, we're a bit brutal, but if we don't feel excited to speak to someone, then we just don't want to. So, and most of the time, I mean, it is probably a really, really great avenue to explore and something we probably should. But yeah, a lot of the requests that we get for guests coming on is always, if you can do a podcast swap or a podcast exchange, and we just haven't been that interested.
No,
it's because we've got such a long list of people we do want to talk to. We've got to get through them first.
Yeah, exactly. I think actually, because we host with Acast, and they have previously tried to cross promote, but
with the ad swaps.
Yeah, with ad swaps. Yeah, that thing.
We did a little bit of that.
But no, I think it's a very good point that if it doesn't feel right to you on the initial suggestion, or you look at the potential partnership and you it comes down, and this is one of the other points I just wanted to touch on, is narrowing your focus on chasing certain metrics and continually, we just want to get a few extra downloads. And I think that's, people can get themselves into situations where they just want to chase more downloads, and then they decide, I'm going to partner with anyone and everyone, and they don't pay much attention to what that does to the listener experience, or how that's going to be received on the other end, and how that's going to influence their own brand that they've built. So I think it probably, there is a strong argument to be made for being so selective about who you choose to position yourselves beside.
Definitely.
Yeah.
To kind of wrap up, I wanted to touch on something which I'm interested in, which I've heard talked about in your podcast and heard on lots of other podcasts as well. It's not specifically about podcasting, this question, but it's this thing of the gut-brain connection, and how we all kind of have this second brain in our digestive system. And we're only kind of, it's becoming widely accepted now that the foods we eat do have a significant impact on how our brain works, how it performs, how we feel, what our mood's like. Do we have these crazy sugar highs and crashes? And I was just wondering, either of you, Sarah, Serena, just you've obviously spent a lot more time looking into this than me, and if there's any interesting stuff in that area that you've been paying attention to recently, or that you think is quite interesting.
I guess I should say that neither of us are nutritionists, so anything that we say, please do your own research and take it with a pinch of salt. I think the aspect of the gut brain thing that really fascinates me is the microbiome and the bacteria in your gut. There's a brilliant book, I think the author's called Alana Collen, and it's called 10% Human, and it's how the number of bacteria in your gut actually far outweigh the number of cells in your body. You're more bacteria than you are yourself, which is pretty gross. But that's a really brilliant book for anyone who wants to learn more about that. And to be honest, I don't know that much more than my own reading and the people that we've chatted to on the podcast, but I think eating loads of vegetables and eating kind of good probiotics and prebiotics is all really key, because if we basically eat good food, we feed the good bacteria in our gut, which has a positive impact on us. And this is clearly put incredibly simply. When we eat badly, like sugar and things, we're really feeding the bad bacteria, and the imbalance in that can do a huge number of things on a mental level, on a physical level. that's kind of as much as I probably feel qualified to say about it. Sarah?
I would just add to that when your gut is happy, then it's having to do less work. So, and kind of what I was saying earlier about eating in a calm environment, if your gut is calm, then that pathway, and I forget which one of your glands, and I can't remember which one it is, but the one that goes straight from your brain to your gut, and it's like the super highway of nervous systems.
Vagus nerve.
Wow,
Vagus.
see? Vagus nerve, yeah. So when your gut is happy, and this is again just from what we've kind of learnt along the way in our podcast, then that connection to your brain will also be a little happier, and vice versa. So yeah, I mean, we're not trained in this, as you can tell, as we're just jumbling things out, but it's definitely so interesting to look into. And we've got a podcast episode with Kimberly Wilson, who speaks about this a lot. So if anyone is interested in this, I would definitely say to have a listen to that one. It's really fascinating.
Nice. And then just the last topic I just wanted to touch on kind of before we wrap up is meditation. It's something which I got into myself a few years ago. And again, it was through the science. Like, I was one of these people who'd be like, this is for hippies with dreadlocks and whatever, and this is not something that I want to get involved with. But then people that I looked up to and respected, they started saying they were meditating. I was like, well, maybe, there's something here. So first of all, are you both into mindfulness and meditation? I would imagine so, based off the podcast. And just I'd be interested to hear, how you feel it's benefited you, or how it's impacted, your relationships and the work that you do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're both meditation teachers, so it's a big part of our lives. I mean, Serena was previously a yoga teacher as well, which is how you got into that bit, Serena. Yeah. But I think for both of us, I know we both practice meditation regularly. It's so important, especially for people who do so many different things and do kind of show up for other people as coaches or as teachers. It's so important for our own practice to check in with ourselves. And I was kind of the same as you, James. I always thought it was like this massive thing that was really separate to me, this meditation thing, which meant that you lifted off the ground and you were suddenly like this guru, and wow, it's this whole different experience. But it's really just you closing your eyes and checking in. And if you're practicing meditative tools of like pranayama or any like stricter meditation practices, then it's just a refocusing of the mind. That's really all it's doing. It's allowing us to focus on something so that the mind doesn't wander, and then we can create a little bit more calm, a little bit more space for ourselves. And it really is just, it's a game changer. And it's to me, it's so wild that we don't all do it. Like it's not everyone, because we really need to, and hopefully in time we will recognize that more and more. But we have this power within ourselves which is free, and we can step into it anytime we want. Serena, I know, does lots more of this, so Serena, I'll let you also talk for this.
No, not at all. I think mine is just a different angle. I think for me personally, on a super simplistic level, anxiety lives in the future, and when we're meditating, we're present. And so for me, that's why I do it. It stops me becoming anxious. But through my hypnotherapy training, I've learned that with our negative self-talk and the way that humans have a tendency to get really fixated on certain ideas, meditation is a way of like diffusing your thoughts, cognitive diffusion, so that you can kind of clear that obsession, I guess, with whatever thought you're stuck on. And for me, I'm now exploring more than meditation, like self-hypnosis and feeding positive ideas back in, and relaxation practices that are super mindful but relieve the tension in the body that builds up as we become more anxious. So you said you like science, James. I'm a bit of a science geek, so I'm like getting really into that side of it all.
Nice. Yeah, I hope like you were saying, Sarah, you would hope that it does become more widespread, or that once you start doing it after a while, like I just noticed a big difference when I am practicing every day versus when I'm not, or when my practice kind of tails off, I do notice a shift in how I respond to stressful situations, or the stickiness of certain thought patterns or whatever seems to be, you know, they crop up and they hang around a bit longer. But hopefully, you know, the dream would be to get it accepted same way everyone brushes their teeth. Like, no one's running around like not brushing their teeth in the morning. Everyone understands like we need to do this to take care of our dental hygiene and health. And likewise in the mental space, like I honestly feel like meditation is kind of like one of those things that it should be a daily practice that, you know, everyone should practice. I mean, we're quite far away from that, but that's the dream at least.
Yeah,
completely agree with you.
Fingers crossed. So thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really do appreciate it. Where should people go to connect with you and find out more about the work you're involved in?
You can find us, well, you can find our podcast on any podcasting places, anywhere you listen to your podcasts, at Kitchen Club, and on Instagram at Kitchen Club Podcast. And then separately to our podcast, my handle on Instagram is at Sarah Malks, and yeah, my member space details for all of that is on there and on my website, sarahmalcolm.co.uk. And Serena, I'll let you do yours.
I'm super simple as well. It's just my name, www.serenalouth.com, and at Serena Louth on Instagram. And Louth is spelt like mouth with an L.
Nice. Cheers. Thank you both. It's been a real pleasure again to speak with you, and hope to see you again sometime in the future.
Thank you so much for having us.
Cheers.
Bye.
That's it for this episode. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. If you enjoyed the conversation or find it useful, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons. Look, it only takes a couple of seconds for you to do, but it really does make a huge difference to myself and to Ben, who's done a great job behind the scenes on all the recording, editing, and post-production work on this series. If there are any podcasters you'd like to see in the next season or topics you'd like us to cover in the future, the best place to leave us that feedback is in the YouTube comments section. Alternatively, you can leave the show a rating and review on Apple Podcasts if you're listening rather than watching. That helps us keep the algorithmic overlords of the audio world happy. Lastly, if it feels right to you, please do tell the other podcasters or aspiring podcasters in your life about the show, as that's still one of the best ways we have to reach the right people with this content. That's it for me. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.